Hey, everybody. This is Jared with Not Aliens and Jim Goodall, and we have a great guest today. We are inviting Robert Bauer on, and we will force him to talk about himself for a minute for all of you to get to know. We are always talking about crazy fun stuff, and Robert and Jim together should be, well, worth everyone's minutes, whether you're watching live eventually or if you want to record it. Robert, that's your cue. How are you? Thanks for coming on.
I'm outstanding, but I'm getting better, and I really appreciate the invite to be with two esteemed intellects that I've recently become acquainted with. There's, in my opinion, far too few of us out there, and so the more that we all get together and start sharing our stuff, I think is better for everyone, but mostly for our own egos, as they are, the primacy of what we are here about.
Yeah, we're strictly here to hear ourselves talk and then play it over and over and over again.
I don't know how many podcasts that I've been on in the last 4 or 5 years, and it's always amazing to me that it's guest driven, or it usually starts with a topic, but when you have different guests on, and then the subjects or the conversation takes a sharp turn one way or the other, and it gets into some of the really cool stuff. And it starts coming out organically and spontaneously. And like I was started to say, I can't imagine how many times in those conversations some really cool, interesting comments or suggestions or ideas come out in those conversations. And I want to go playing back and say, what the hell was that? What rabbit hole did we end up in? Yeah. And that's happened every time I've been on with Jim.
Yeah.
So it's always, a treat to get on with him and go, all right, where are we going now? But
don't stop. Take one more second while we're chatting and at least tell everybody about your background.
Okay. So I typically use the phrase that I'm an autodidact semiotician with an insatiable curiosity and an over-fertilized field of imagination. So
wow.
that causes a bunch of what? and it's essentially it's kind of a summation of my life. I've been in music for 50 years, technology for 40 years. I've been studying philosophy and the sciences, both the physics and metaphysics, for about 30 years. And in the last 20 plus years, I've been an independent content creator. I've had my own independent music label that I started back in 1998. Produced a number of works, a very eclectic range of music. As you can see, I'm a guitar player. Started playing when I was 13. My grandfather, who taught me on my mother's side, used to play with Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. For those who go back that far, big old swing band. So all of those, it's quite a varied set of life experiences and skills that have led me to have what I consider to be a multidisciplinary approach to just life. If you're a musician, you typically can get into some of the technology. A lot of geeks are musicians. I'm a geezer geek. Built software for Fortune 500 companies, traveled around the world selling and implementing that. And most of that led me to being a seeker, an independent thinker, a traveler, an explorer in the realm of reality. So I'll be 66 in July. So during the pretty much about the 50-year mark is when all of these things started. And so I've been very blessed and very honored to go through the life experience that I've been given in this iteration. It seems as though I've completed some karmic agreements and contracts during this period of time. And I'm now at a place where apparently I'm free to go about and do the things that I'm here to do, which is to continue the exploration, but now with more information, more experience, more insight, and more incredibly interesting and intellectual friends that help me along that journey.
I like turtles. Sorry.
You like shiny objects too, I'm sure.
I just do. They're so shiny and sparkly, and you're well, you nailed the show. It's really, you know what I found, and again, thank you so much for coming on. I think that one of the hardest things about oh, what is that? Somebody, I can hear something.
That was my phone went off. Sorry about that. I turned it off.
That's and for those that don't understand your introduction as to who you are, do you just back up and say, today has been brought to you by the letter A and the number 4. and the interesting thing I found when you try to explain to people, it sounds such a cliche to say, hey, I'm a Renaissance person. So many people are identified by a singularity of their career or their artistry, or they'll say, I'm just this one thing. And it's not that you're many things. It's just that you are you. There are things that you do. And some people identify as those things. But the reality is everyone's way more complex and connected. And some people start on a path where they realize it, and other people are kind of still, whatever, they're getting there. But either way, I found something really interesting when I finally got my first book out about, this, it's not aliens and worse, it's us, discovering a lost history, that stuff. But when I started doing interviews, I started getting asked to co-host interviews. And so I've done hundreds where I've co-hosted, or instead of being the person being interviewed, and from coast to coast to Richard Hoagland, and I've done all that stuff. And I really enjoy, like, Richard Hoagland. It's been really fun to go from a listener to being one of the active researchers. But I think it's really interesting. There are people, when you said the natural organic progression of a conversation, there's a difference. Jim and I, I'm speaking for you, Jim. We are not podcasters. We are not, what you are all doing listening to us is not a mistake. It's just that we are researchers and writers and experimenters, and just like yourself. And that's something for everyone who listens to this in the future is going to be pretty excited about. So if there's any foreboding for Robert, it's exciting, not punishing. But yes. I found, and this isn't a criticism, it's just a continued observation, that there are people who are like, oh, I'm going to podcast and stuff. And it's like, well, we podcast because we also have to have a stream conversation ongoing out loud. And I think that's the distinction. We're actually trying to have a dialogue with you and the people we work with, where on the backside, we're actually trying to incorporate these new ideas in actual, life and experimentation. And it's not just a dialogue or an intellectual pursuit. It is that also, but it's not just hey, we're podcasters and we're going to have a good podcast. It's just not it. We're talking because we have to. We are compelled. The power of the knowledge compels us.
Well, there is. Yeah. The as I said, I used to, my opening, I had a show that I did for a few years, and I'm going to resurrect it. And the name of the show is the Nexus Nextcast, because podcast is a hangover from a technology that it isn't even in use anymore.
Yeah.
And the idea was that I wanted to have interesting conversations with interesting people, because that conversation aspect is one of the most important parts of the exploration, whether you're beginning, in the middle, or at the end of it. So the opening was, welcome fellow seekers, travelers, explorers, and independent thinkers, because that's what I'm interested in. And to your other point that you're making at the beginning about, we're more than just one specific aspect of our experience, is that one of my favorite phrases is, we are one in many and many in one. And I don't think that people actually understand the reality of that, let alone the importance of that. We're not just who we are from, our environmental and our genetic upbringing and experience. There's a lot more going on if you pay attention. And paying attention is one of the things that I think people have lost. It's like conversation. The art of conversation is a lost art. And so my whole point of doing the Nexus was, the concept is the Nexus is where everything meets. And I think that everything is connected in the universe and in consciousness, which is where I think the universe comes from. So I start from that premise and then go forth and see what path opens up.
What, Jim, did you have a question?
Yeah. No, I was just agreeing what you said earlier. But when you, Robert, when you're talking about the conversation, that art is lost. I'm taking my daughter now. She was about 16 at the time, or 15, and my stepdaughter and another girl. We're driving somewhere. And my daughter is just, she's carrying on a conversation with me and with Molly, and she's just texting away. And we finally get to our destination. I said, who are you texting so so actively, or however you want to put it?" She said, I was texting Molly. She said, "Molly's in the back seat." You turn around and say, "Hey, Molly." She said, "No, but we were talking about the girl sitting next to her."
Oh, jeez.
And my daughter could be talking to somebody, looking at the TV or the computer screen, totally something different, and sending out a text with no errors.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, every time I get a text, I had a bag phone back in the late '80s. When they first came out.
You did.
All
right.
And I've still got it somewhere stashed, because every time I get a new piece of tech, and then the next piece would come along, I just grab the old one, throw it in a box, and say, one of these days I'm going to have a nice little museum, all this shit. Remember pagers, right? Back in the day. But once these smartphones had this text capability, and I mean, I play guitar, my fingers are fairly agile, and I got a lot of dexterity, but I can't sit there on that little keypad and do that shit. If somebody sends me a text, it's like, wait a minute, I'm just calling you because I haven't got time. It's going to be shorter to talk on the phone than it is for me to type it out.
Hey, Robert, when you've done the compositions and music that you've produced, is there ever a point in any specific piece and what you've done, or even as a guitar player, where you felt like your brain like hit a different level, or not just a general Zen zone? Yeah, you know what I'm asking.
There's multiple ones, and for me as a musician, those are the moments that you seek. Because harmony and resonance and sound, I'll just toss this little nugget in and then get back out of it. But I believe that there's a reasonable case to be made that light comes from sound. But in the sonic experience that I've had, there was one in particular. This is back in the early 2000s. And I was working with an author who created a series of children's books, and it was called Stress Free Kids. So she had created these books to help teach children how to breathe and have affirmations and relax and so forth. And she'd written a bunch of these books, and I said, you need to make these into audio books. This is back when CDs were still a big deal. So in my studio, Musical Voyage, where I produced my works for Intuitive Sound, which is my label, we had done some, I think it was 6 to 9, and then we did a 9 to 12, and then we did a teen version, and then it came time to do an adult version. So on the adult version, I wrote all the music for all of them and produced them. She had different other voice artists come in for the children's books, an older woman, and I think her husband actually did one. But when it came time to do the adult version, I said, I'll not only write the music, I'll do the voiceover for it. So there was one piece on breathing, and I had written the composition for it, and it was layered keys and some synth. But when I got down to I had the final tracks and I was doing the final mix, I was sitting there in front of my board in the control room.
Yeah.
And I was listening to it, and I fell to my knees in tears. It hit me so hard. It was a euphoric but very humbling moment. And what made it even more profound is I realized that I just wrote that. And I believe that it was, I channeled it. I was the vehicle with which that set of harmonies and that music came out, but it just laid me on the floor. And those moments in music is what I'm always looking for. And so yes, there's there's solos, there's harmonies and vocals, there's moments playing guitar. It becomes very ethereal to me. And I think that music is the universal language that we all share.
I mean, I've always loved music since I was a little kid. I mean, my mom would turn on big band, back in the late 40s. And I went and saw Elvis Presley when I was 11 in 1957 in San Francisco, his first concert. But to me, music is a time machine. I can hear a song I haven't heard in 60 years. And if it had an effect on me, I will know where I was at, who I was with, what I was wearing. I mean, it's instant. And maybe I haven't heard that song in 50 or 60 years. I'm an old guy. But in my heart, I'm either 15 or 35. Some cases I'm 12.
Stick with somewhere legal.
Yeah. No, but I just music is, when I hear music, I'm in especially music I enjoy. And I other than heavy metal, I like it all. And to me, it takes me out of where I'm at right now and puts me in a very, very special place. And it's my refuge. If I was having a bad day, and I've had a few of those in my 78 years. What gets me through any bad times or hard times is music. And it's just, I can remember when I first started traveling in middle of America. This is back in 71. I didn't like country and Western music. And that's all you had in Kansas and Oklahoma.
But Jim, there's country and there's Western, right?
Yeah, right. And I'm to the point now. I love it. I love all of that. Venue of music. It's just something that I think my heart is drawn to it because it is.
To your point about time machine, Jim, I end up in very, I guess what people would consider esoteric conversations. Mm-hmm. I easily flow from the physics to the metaphysics, from the ethereal to the material, and enjoy the journeys in each one of them. But inevitably, at some point, time travel will come up in the discussion. And there's, lots of opinions. There's pseudoscience and, a bunch of speculation around how that may actually or may not actually work. But I always say, you want examples of time travel? Just listen to music.
Yeah.
Listen to something that you grew up with, or that's something that has a profound meaning to you in a place and time. And, I've been working on a playlist on YouTube that I've been putting together. It's close to 300 tunes now, but it's titled Great Old School Music. So it's got everything from Petula Clark to Rush and everything in between. And to me, all of it's music that I remember, that I listened to, that I grew up with my grandfather playing with Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. My stepdad was an old country boy, so I grew up with Merle Haggard and that whole genre, listening to that. But my mom and her mom were both singers. And we had a place, I grew up in Southern California, and we had a place on the Colorado River about 4 hours away. It was 4 hours door to dock. And mom and grandma would just fire up those tunes, and we would all just be singing downtown, things are really great, and all this shit. And it was just so, I got so, I don't know if it was necessarily indoctrinated as much as it was, I was just resonating with it. And it's been with me ever since. So yeah, time travel, just listen to some great music you grew up with and tell me that's not time travel.
Yeah. I just love it. And
does any of it stick with you, Robert, when you're, is there anything you can particularly, is it all of it, or are there particular pieces you can replay every day that snap you right to that higher place?
Lots of them. I mean, so my taste in music is extremely eclectic. I love Beethoven, Bach, all the way to the Beatles. I have tried heavy metal. I was actually in some back in '75. I was in I guess it was that time. It was early heavy metal, or heavy rock. A band called Maelstrom, and we opened up for Van Halen before Ted Templeton found it, but they were already big in the Pasadena area where we all were. And interesting, ironic piece to that is that the place we opened up for them was called the Golden Corral, and 6 years later, it was a Pentecostal church where I ended up having a music ministry.
Oh, geez.
So it was quite the odd journey between those two. But the first time I heard rap, I thought, this is it's kind of ebonics with a rhythm. I didn't really appreciate what the attempt was. A lot of it was going by so fast I couldn't tell what the hell they were talking about, let alone the words, let alone what the storyline was. And so I didn't really gel into that. And so the heavy metal, the really loud screaming shit with pounding guitars, that's just too much of an assault or an affront on my senses. And then rap and hip hop there is some good rap and hip hop. Some of the production, that's one of the other things I always say about music. I will appreciate and enjoy anything if the performance and the production are done very, very well. May not like the music, but if they've performed it well and it's produced really well, I can appreciate those aspects of whatever that is done for that kind of music. But to your question, Jared, that's one of the reasons there's 300 songs on that playlist.
Yeah.
Not all of them are, ones that have that kind of an immediate experience, but music in general has that effect on me. And there are some songs and some pieces of music that are just much more profound and instantaneous than others.
Sure. I grew up in a military dictatorship. My father was born and raised in the infantry, and he had no use for rock and roll or anything else. But the only person that composed music that he really liked was John Philip Sousa. So, I've heard literally all his music over, especially in my youth. But when I hear it, I get a good feeling. I mean, I don't know if it's the pomp and circumstances or however you call it. It's just something that it makes you want to stand up and smile and maybe salute the flag.
Yeah.
And even though there's a lot of our youth today that have no pride or love of our country, which I find absolutely unbelievable.
Well, that's a whole nother rabbit hole. And to that point, I'm sure you guys remember Whitney Houston's Star Spangled Banner back in 1991.
Yeah.
I mean, that brings tears to my eyes just about every time. And then the most recent one with Chris Stapleton,
I was
just out there with the guitar.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
Good God, did that man kill that? It was of that same, to me, same Whitney Houston level. Yeah, just amazing.
I got goosebumps about that. I mean, I can remember it was the bicentennial year. I was in the IDS Center downtown Minneapolis, and I was walking out the ground level door, heading over to across Nicollet Mall to Dayton's, and it was the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. And just as I opened the door, they started playing "America the Beautiful." And literally everybody's just standing there. You could see tears coming down. They were outside and it's all glass and steel around, but the sound was unbelievable. And then they did "America the Beautiful." Then they did the Star Spangled Banner and a few others. And people, you couldn't cram any more people in that area. And it was just phenomenal. And that's something that, are there things that have happened that have made you just stand up and say, boy, that was real. That really had an effect on me. That's one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And the other
Ray
one,
Charles's version of America the Beautiful is
yes,
just stellar. I mean, when somebody has that, and this is what Whitney and Chris Stapleton that we were just talking about have, when you have that emotive quality within your voice and your presence, I mean, it's just game over. That's what I look for, that resonance, that the harmonic sonic experience. For me, it's a sonic satiation, right? I want to be washed over. I want to feel it. I want to have that gnosis experience. I want to feel it in my bones.
I remember the
go
first
ahead, Jim.
First time I heard Andres Segovia, he was at Minneapolis Orchestra Hall, which has almost perfect acoustics. And here's this little man with his short, stubby fingers. He comes out on stage. He sits in the chair, and he's sitting there, and people are still, jabbering around, talking to each other. All of a sudden, they realize that he wasn't going to start until there was absolute silence.
Mm-hmm.
And then he started playing. And I saw Segovia 3 times, twice at Orchestra Hall, and once when I lived in LA, he was at Poly Pavilion. I went there with a buddy of mine, and he can make that guitar. You can probably get that guitar to knit, and I mean, it's just unbelievable the sound that came out of that man, and it's just, and I love that. And one of the other funny things about music and your guitars in the background, when I lived in Hawaii, I was doing some searching, and I just said my name, so I punch in James Goodall, and there's James Goodall guitars. So I sent Mr. Goodall an email, and I said, I called him up. He said, who's it? Who do you want to speak to? I said, Jim Goodall. I said, who am I speaking to? Jim Goodall. Now, don't be a wise ass. Who are you? I said, I am James C. Goodall. I've seen you. I've seen your name on searches of my name, and we never met face to face. He lived in Maui, and I lived in Oahu. And then when I finally headed over there, he had already left, or maybe I think he had passed away by then. But it's ironic how music really affects everything a person does, and where they go and how they feel.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Well, and so Robert, this brings me to maybe it's too early in the day for us being this deep. Oh wait, I'm lying. All right. I was going to ask, what do you think of the feedback? When you're constantly, for everyone that doesn't know, I played the violin very seriously till I was in my 20s, and now there is those zones, and I think I've always been personally, I have that, I don't know what it is, that connection with music in general, but when you get feedback from what you've created and what's come out of you as an origin, or you have those different musics that set you into those crazy cosmic spaces. Have you ever been taken aback or put in a different place by someone else's experience of your music?
Both on the positive and the negative side.
Oop. Well, you know what? Life has nightmares.
In fact, I just was having a flashback earlier today.
Drugs.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Yeah. They just kind of show up whenever they want.
Yeah.
There was back in the mid 70s, I was playing a party with some friends at somebody's house, and one of my childhood high school friends that I was in several bands with, he was one of those musicians that could pick up something, figure it out in 5 minutes, and master it in another 5 minutes.
Oh, wow.
One of those, savant kind of musicians. And his primary instrument was sax. So this was back in when Chicago, Tower of Power, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Cold Blood, all those rock horn bands were coming out in the 70s. So we had our own version that we had in high school. The high school we went to, the music director was Bruce Gifford. And about 5 years before we came through there, Richard and Karen Carpenter were under his tutelage.
Oh,
And in fact, we
Oh.
lived just across the major street from Richard and Karen. We used to drive by their house and hang out
Real
the window.
slow, real
Black
slow.
Sabbath rules, you know. Thought we were cool. But at this party, I had this little pig nose amp. The thing was, you know, about this big, and I think there was 6 or 7 musicians. We were playing on a patio out in the backyard. There was like one of those little stages you see in a bar, and you go, "How are we all going to fit on there?" And we were playing "Feeling All Right," and just rocking the hell out of it. And I took a solo, and I remember being in the zone. I was looking at my fingers while I was playing this solo, and I was going, "Holy shit, I'm playing this solo." And I looked up, and my buddy, who was the sax player, he had his sax pulled to the side, and he was looking down at my fingers, and his eyes were wide, and he had this big smile, and he was enjoying that very same moment that I was. And
Oh,
he
that's
was,
tripping.
and I just had that flashback to that, and went, "Oh yeah, I remember that was awesome." So that's to the positive side, and there's been, you know, many other examples of that. But to the negative side, that same piece that I was mentioning earlier that I had written for the adult, they called it Indigo Dreams Adult Meditation. They released that on put it on Amazon, and it's still up there. They're still selling it. And there was, I don't know, 70 or 80 reviews, most of them from people who had been looking for something to help with their depression or the anxiety, or to help their kids. And a lot of them were from clinicians and professionals who were saying, "I've prescribed this CD to my patients, and they've gotten great results." And so I'm reading this, and I'm going, I'm done. I have fulfilled one of the important things where I'm making a difference in people's lives with something that I created. And then one day, this guy wrote this review, and it was very specific. It was very well written, and he ripped me to shreds. He ripped the music, he ripped the production, he ripped my voiceover. I mean, but he did it very eloquently. I mean, it was just extremely well done. And I'm reading some of it, and I went, I didn't think about it that way, but I kind of maybe agree with that. And so it was extremely humbling. And in, you know, the first reaction you think is, well, that's gotta hurt, right? And as I read it, and I sat there with it for a few minutes, I said, no, this is exceptionally good. So I replied to him and thanked him for his review. And it was just an example of, for me, that, you know, it doesn't matter what you do. It could be sculpting, it could be painting. I've got some incredible artistic friends that are awesome artists, painters and drawers and graphic people. And it could be music, it could be anything else. It's not going to resonate with everybody. It's just not. There's going to be people that it will resonate with, and if you're lucky, it's going to be more of that than the people that it doesn't resonate with. But that's a part of being an artist. It's a part of not just being an artist; it's a part of being a human. I mean, you're not going to resonate with everybody you meet. There's that, you know, famous saying about, you know, just if you're irritating somebody, it's not because you're wrong, it's because you're irritating their demons, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. And I think that people don't realize that the resonance that you carry within, that makes up who you are, and how you become one with it, and how you understand your own frequency, your own resonance of being, from your mind, your body, your spirit, your soul, whatever those things mean to you, whatever constitutes you. Finding and fine-tuning that frequency set of oneself is the most important part, I think, of all of our journeys. And that doesn't mean that it's going to resonate with everyone else, but those that it does, that's the attraction that you have of who you are, because who you are is a set of frequencies. It's a set of vibrations and resonance.
And I think that's what I like about Jared. I haven't seen you in person, but I could feel that through the through the ones and zeros coming into my computer, that you and I and Jared and I, we transmit and receive on the same frequency. And that's to me. And there's, of all the people in the world, there's people that like you, there's people that don't care, and there's people that hate you. I'm only in two categories with people. Either people really, really like me, or they can't stand me. There's no middle ground, and there never has been.
Yeah.
And I don't care, but it's just interesting when people are so turned off against you, and they don't even know who you are.
I think all of us, when you're the more grounded, or not even grounded, the more you are part of this system of not distraction, and or the more you are a real human being and actually connecting back, there's a lot of resistance. I hate to relate it to something like as dumb as the Matrix, but it seems to be that kind of a comparison where we're the more grounded, the more connected, the more you see things the way they really are. I think for those that want to be distracted and don't want to really look at themselves, you automatically become repelling.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think authenticity, like conversation, is a lost concept, not let alone an art.
Oh, 30 seconds is it, right? 30 seconds.
Yeah. And, I think that if people understood that being your authentic self is a search that begins within, and that, it might sound kind of new agey, but it is true. You have to find that which resonates within oneself before you can find what resonates outside of yourself. Because, we are all pummeled by a tsunami of shit, frequencies, data, the physical world, the immaterial world. And it's more difficult now to sort through that and find the things that make sense than it ever has been. Mm-hmm. So in a lot of ways, when I run into people who don't resonate or think that I'm, some kind of alien, right? I'm not from these parts. I used to be more inclined to challenge that. Now I accept it. And I start with an acceptance that somebody just doesn't get it, or they just don't get me, whatever, forget about what it is. Mm-hmm. But finding what resonates with someone else starts with one of the other things that I'm working on, a book called Informatica, and it's my concept of reality. It's the metrics in the matrix of reality. Because if you look at the way we interact with everything that we encounter, whether we realize it or not, whether we're conscious of it or not, there is a set of metrics. There is measurement about. And some things, if you get into the quantum mechanics realm, the whole problem they have is if you can't observe it, you can't measure it. Therefore, it's not. But what they try to do is, essentially what I think they're doing in quantum mechanics is they're taking all the esoteric shit and just applying math to it.
That's graphic,
right? When you think about mediums and psychic abilities and paranormal stuff and all these things, the quantum realm, they've gotten to the point where they've just come up with some way to put math to it and come up with these models that can never be proven because they can't be tested. But there's more and more of that going on. And I think as an example, remote viewing is a perfect example of that, where you may not be able to measure the actual technique, but you can measure the results. You can see what happened when you started here and you ended up there. What happened in between, you may not be able to explain. Yeah, but there's demonstrable results from where you started to where you ended up. So,
by the way, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
No, well, I was going to say this, everyone who's listening now and continuing to, this was Jim's idea, and Robert and I got to meet and have spent a number of hours together. And I think we are going to, like, obviously, this is going to continue to be a great conversation. I have to personally step out for the first time almost ever, and Jim gets to do this solo if you'd like, Jim. Would that be good?
Sure. I mean, are you leaving permanently or?
Well, we were about to do this for, we had about an hour on the books, or maybe, well, we normally go, Robert, I now know this was a mistake because we are going to talk for 3 hours at a minimum.
Well, the last time I talked to Robert was almost just hair under 3 hours. So.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing. When Jim and I do this together on this show, we go like, oh, 2.5 hours is nothing. That's 5 minutes. With you, this is officially going to go on. And I'm officially going to, normally we would do this later in the night. I'm the one with the weird schedule because of some trip planning for our adventure in Belize. But if you would not mind, I'm going to pull myself from the stream and put you guys side by side. Jim, you are officially in charge of taking this as long as you want.
Well, I know, Robert, you said you had about an hour before you.
Yeah, I've actually, I have my girlfriend from Canada arriving tomorrow night. And I am one of the reasons I'm keeping an eye on my phone. My first granddaughter is about to be born within the next 24 hours.
Oh, well, this is nuts. I had trouble getting the Wi-Fi to work where I'm at, and that cut into my time. But I'm going to let you guys go at it then for another, it sounds like 20 minutes.
Well, I mean, we can't even start a conversation with that little bit of time.
That's the opening statement.
Robert just brought his book up. It's going to take him 20 more minutes on the last question.
Yeah.
In a good way for everyone listening. This is and to consulting points point. Look, see, this is our norms. This is no pressure. I'm just saying, man, I am going to let you guys keep talking. I'm gotta go.
All right.
So,
Jared, it's been a pleasure to meet you, a digital person.
I know.
The conversations that we've had up to this point have just been extremely stimulating and very enjoyable. And I'm looking forward to more.
Yes. Well, you know what? Next week, Jim and I are at this. We're also on Michigan UFO sightings next week. But you guys chat. I'll catch up with you later tomorrow.
All right.
All right. Great. Thank you.
So, I mean, I'm going to have to run pretty soon. Also, I have a lot of.
You got to get trip prep going, don't you?
Well, I'm all packed. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I can get everything in my bag. I have a huge roller bag. Doesn't weigh a lot, but I have a lot of bulk. The thing that weighs a lot is my backpack. I have my Nikon. I have four lenses in there, and that glass is heavy. And then I have my my Mac in the back also. So you pick that thing up, you don't think it's be very heavy. It must weigh about 15, 18 pounds worth of technology in there. Everything else
here. Yeah.
Everything else is going in beneath the floor as we head off to Belize. And it's something I'm really, really looking forward to. I have wanted to do this. And since I was a little kid, when I was watching Tarzan movies, I mean, we're going to be in that same environment or similar environment, and I know you would have a ball. And this is just the first trip, and we're going to be going down on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to participating in the future on the ground. And you mentioned Tarzan growing up. You remember Sea Hunt?
Oh yeah.
And Jacques Cousteau, and
oh yes.
I mean, those were underwater, which I've always found fascinating. But and hell, there's more underwater than there is above water. So being able to do some of those explorations would be just absolutely fascinating. But getting down there into Mesoamerica and that whole, I think I'd mentioned to you once before, I think that, with the technology that we have today with LiDAR and infrared and ground penetrating, radar. I think they're going to find more in the Mesoamerican from Mexico all the way down into Peru than as they ever thought possible, and it's probably going to lead, in my opinion, to providing a great deal of evidence for this lost concept of civilization known as Atlantis. And I think that the connection between Mesoamerica and Egypt is going to start coming out even more, and that to me is kind of one of the connections to this Atlantean type civilization. But you guys are going to go down there crawling around in the jungle.
Yeah.
And I'm green with envy.
Well, I have my Kevlar chaps just in case some of those little things without legs are scurrying around.
Yeah.
And I was looking at a website of what do I have to look out for when I go to Central America. So they had a whole list of poisonous snakes, the poisonous frogs, and poisonous spiders. And I figured, well, none of them have caught me yet. So I think I'll be pretty safe.
Hey, you remember, for the most part, when you would look for the indications of dangerous animals, it would be footprints, right? You'd have, but you're talking about stuff that don't have footprints. They just show up and you're like, I've seen that mug on a picture of bad stuff before.
Behind our home here in Oro Valley, Arizona, there's a wildlife corridor, and it used to be a very nice golf course. Beyond that, it went out of business because they were paying almost $50,000 a month for water.
Wow.
Yeah. But I have a good friend of mine who is a golfer. I'm not a golfer, but I would go out there and I would collect golf balls, and in the trees and the rough and around the cactus. And I had a real long pole with something I can grab a ball with. And I got in this one area, I could see 3 or 4. And these are Pro V1s. Apparently those, that's a real good golf ball. And I took about 10 steps to get in there, and I got 2 of the balls. I'm going for the third, and I look down, and about this far from, get in there and you can see me. From me was a body about this big around, going away with this very unusual diamond pattern on its back. It took me 10 steps again. It took me less than 2 to get out. And I just, I found rattlesnakes in our yard. I mean, this is where they used to live. So it's, I just tell my wife, I said, when you go out, if it's been a warm day and it's getting kind of cool at night, when you open the back door to go out by the pool, look down first before you step. Because I've known people that, go out their back doors, step on a rattlesnake, and sure as shooting you're going to get bit. But, and a while ago, I don't know if he's still on. There's a gentleman said, "What music do you listen to when you're at Mach 3.2?" And I said, David Bowie, and Ground Control to Major Dom. I mean, that's a movie like that. Now, I can't remember Getzel's first name. One of the F-117 pilots that was on the bombing of Baghdad during Desert Storm, he took a tape with him, and he said he listened to the whole thing till he actually ran the tape so many times that it started getting garbled. And it was the Moody, I think it was the Moody Blues, Days of Future Past.
Amazing stuff.
Yeah, and he said they're going and coming back. And when the first night they went out, none of those people knew if there was a statement, "Gee, I hope this stealth shit really works." Ben Rich even said that when they were sending the guys off to bomb Baghdad, and there was a colonel. I think it was Chris Meyer, Chris Mayer or Chris Maurer, or whatever it was. He graduated from the Air Force Academy in '76, and he figured 86, 96. there's, it was 72, excuse me. And he said, I should be able to get my 20 years in without a war. And he was the last F-117 on the way to Baghdad. And he's says if it wasn't for autopilot, he would not have been able to turn. He's going right on the border of Iran and Iraq. And when Baghdad was due west, his airplane turned into it. And he said, that all that AAA that's going up on on CNN of downtown Baghdad, that was a postage stamp size image of a football field full of AAA and stuff being shot at him.
Wow.
And he said he was so spooked, he actually lowered his seat all the way and put his head underneath the glare shields, and he's just flying with his IRAD. And he saw an F-117 going underneath him this way and another one going underneath this way. And they all had their specific assigned altitudes to make sure they didn't crash into each other because they were on radio silence. And he said, my primary target is in the other side of Baghdad. I don't know if I'm going to if I'll ever make it. There was stuff coming up. And he said when the SA-5 went right by him, maybe 500 feet away, that's when he really got spooked. But it didn't detect him. And when his target, I believe he was the one who dropped the bomb down the elevator shaft. And that's how accurate the laser guided bombs were. But he said when he finally got into the Saudi frontier, he was hoping he'd get there before it became light, because even though you're invisible to radar, if you're up in a blue sky with a black airplane, you're going to be very, very visible. So when he got to the Saudi frontier, he lowered down his antennas. He figured he was the only survivor. And he got hold of an AWACS, and he said, did anybody make it? And he said, yeah, you're the last one out. He said, everybody made it? Yep. So, he was a great relief to him. As he's coming into his base in northern Saudi Arabia, he figured that I'll land, there'll be a few crew members there to marshal my airplane where it's supposed to be, and then it's time to get some shut-eye. As he landed, he's going down the taxiway. Everybody on the base was along the taxiway waving American flags. Everybody, and he said about 1,000 people there. He said it was a hell of a introduction to warfare to come home to something like that. So
that's got to make you feel a very special way after coming off of a mission like that, and then having that kind of reception. I could only imagine. I enlisted in the Air Force back right after they had just finished the mandatory draft.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to play my guitar in the USO, and I figured I was going to travel around the world playing music at military bases and for the folks. And because I enlisted and I passed, apparently I qualified for every job except for some brain surgeon shit, which I would never do anyway. But they gave me a year before I had to come in, and I could bail out at the end of it if I didn't want to go in. And during that year, all of my friends said, do you think you're going in to play your guitar? They're going to swap that out with an M16, and you're going to be shooting at people. They're going to be shooting at you. And they convinced me, and I decided not to go in. But that was my closest, except for my parents. My dad's was in the Air Force over in Okinawa, and both of my grandparents were in World War II, I guess. But that's the closest I've had to any kind of military experience, other than really having a great deal of appreciation and admiration for the whole concept of military training, the discipline, being, having to go through and understand the importance of getting something, getting a plan together, getting prepared for it, and going and executing it, and then, gauging your performance and making improvement. Many years ago, I came to the thought that one of the things that should be taught to young people is that military mindset, that ability to be disciplined and be focused and stay on task, because by God, they sure as hell don't do that today.
No. I just when I went in on my 17th birthday, I was a juvenile delinquent, and it was my best option. So off I went, and I aced all the tests as well. And and in my family, I have, going back to Matt Anthony Wayne during the Revolutionary War. My great grandfather was a brigadier general. My great great grandfather, brigadier general. My great grandfather was a colonel. My grandfather, James Goodall, was a colonel. My dad got out after World War II, and he was a captain. And I'm the only enlisted guy in the group, but I've probably had the most fun because where I've been, what I've done, and my favorite place is right there, right behind me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was even there in 1964. I didn't see anything, unfortunately. But back in the early 90s, I walked in about 3.5 miles from the north fence line. And I think I lost 15 pounds due to perspiration, and it was 30 degrees out. Because I was just, the fraud I was married to she was a good seamstress, and she made a poncho for me out of two survival blankets, the type that's aluminized on one side and orange, and she quilted on the outside infrared suppressive desert camouflage material. So I'm wearing the poncho. And if I heard anything, all I have to do is just go down, and I don't represent a large infrared signature. So I was actually in my stealth mode. But every rise I would go over, there was another one. I finally, literally, I was sopping wet. I figured, no, I can't do this anymore. I turned around and hightailed back, and it's. But I have literally been in March of 64. I flew from Edwards to, I believe it has to be Area 51. That's the only place that, they block the windows so you can't see out. And when we got to the base, we landed. We were in a Fairchild F-27, and they had 4 school buses, 2 on each side, right next to the airplane. When we got out and said, "Don't look around, just go straight in the hangar." And that's what we did. And I was there for 5 hours. You could hear, I know now, blackbirds taking off. And I was installing some ground-based telemetry system there. The same equipment I was installing at Edwards. Little did I know that there was a whole gaggle worth of A-12s there, not just the the early YF-12s. So I've had an affection towards Area 51, for forever. Most everything I write about that's in the air was flight tested there. But you were talking about the ocean. I think that's why I love submarines, because Jacques Cousteau sea hunt with
Lloyd Bridges.
Oh yeah, Lloyd, and then all the other ones that are related, that revolved around water. And I've always loved the water. I've always loved the ocean. I used to go to Santa Cruz all the time. And when I lived in LA, I lived in 18th and the Strand in Manhattan Beach. I lived in Hermosa for a bit, and I lived in Redondo for a bit. But the most fun I ever had as a place, I lived in Southern California. This is the 60s. I lived it was 182nd Street and Hawthorne Boulevard, sort of right behind Bob's Big Boy. It was the world's first all singles apartment complex. You had to be over 21, under 35, and single. And we started, and then probably about a year after the Friday, as they called it, it was Friday USA, opened up. The South Bay Club, I think it was South Bay Club, opened up there just off of PCH and Palos Verdes. And it was, we would have rival parties. Red Eye Liquor there in Torrance, we had a standing order for 10 kegs of beer for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And as long as you called them by 1:59:59 in the morning, they would deliver. And
those were the days, huh? I mean,
and I survived them.
that's when the whole concept of the the love, free
Oh,
sex, free rock and roll,
yeah,
free drugs.
yeah.
I mean, all those places, Hermosa, Redondo, Huntington Beach,
And I worked in
Costa
Hollywood.
Chica.
I worked in Hollywood for Xerox. So all I dealt with were the young, the young girls in the office. I had all the studios, and it was just a time and place that came and went.
Yeah, I was there. I grew up there in the 60s and 70s. Came of age. I was 13 in 1970. So the entire 70s, that decade from 13 to 23,
Sort of blur.
it was a blur. There are little nuggets of awesomeness that I remember,
Yeah.
and so I know I was there, and it was just an amazing time, an amazing place. I've been asked, well, if you had to, the option to pick where you would want to grow up in a time and place, 70s in Southern California.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a magical place. And it wasn't because of Disneyland either. But although if you could get an e-ticket back then, you were the shit.
And no one knows what an e-ticket is today.
Nobody knows what an e-ticket is.
I mean, I was at Disneyland. I've been to Disneyland 61 times. When I lived in Mission Viejo, friends would come in and we got to go, from out of state, we have to go to Disneyland and a few other places. But my first time we went there was Christmas Eve, 1956. And the place was empty. Christmas Day, you couldn't get another body in there. Christmas Eve, they closed at 6. I think it was 6 p.m. We rode everything. There wasn't a line for anything. Mm-hmm. And Disneyland, not anymore, because I think their reputation is a wee bit tarnished.
Just a tad.
Yeah. I'm the first kid to ever ride the Matterhorn. The Matterhorn ride was built and manufactured in Mountain View, California, at an amusement park. Amusement manufacturing company make rides for places like Disneyland. And my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Klein, and we're coming up on Easter break. She said, my son's working on, I know you really like, Disneyland. You watch it every Sunday, Disney on Parade or whatever it was called back then. He said, my son is working for an amusement company that is making some rides for Disneyland. Over Christmas break, here's his address. His name is Mike. You come over, just go over there and tell him that he knows all about you. Just say, your mom sent me here. So I went over there, and it was a beautiful day. They had their service door open, and I just walked right in. I said, I'm looking for a Michael Klein. He said, that's me. He said, you must be Jimmy. And I said, yeah. He says, so he showed me they used HO track on the original model to depict it. And he says, we have about one that's about half the height, and we're just testing it. And we have sandbags in it. So do you want to be the first person to ride on the Matterhorn?
Human sandbag.
And I said, yeah. So he took out a couple sandbags, gave me a whistle. He said, when you get tired, blow the whistle. We'll come and stop the thing. Because they just ran around the clock. So that's my only claim to fame to Disneyland. So
wow. Did you ever go to Knott's Berry Farm?
Way back when, before it was anything big.
They had the log ride and a few other things there, but what I remember was their damn boysenberry jelly or jam, whatever that was.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that stuff was just. And then later on in the mid '80s, when I moved from Los Angeles to Chicago with the mother of my children, we were trying to figure out how to make money out there in the middle of nowhere. And we started Hawaiian Shave Ice, which we found in Huntington Beach. Before we left, they started opening these because it's shaved ice, but all the flavors were, had actual fruit syrup and all that. So I found a manufacturer of the syrup, and they had boysenberry juice. So I would do these festivals and fairs in Indiana and the northern part of it, out in the middle of these cornfields and shit. And I was serving, I had guava, had peach, had boysenberry, and we'd sit there and I would take a bottle of peach schnapps and then we would make orange shave ice, and then we'd pour the peach schnapps on it. About halfway through the festivals, we'd just be hammered, just passing out Hawaiian shave ice. People go, "What's a boysenberry?" "Oh man, you got to try this. You guys must be from another planet." Yeah, Southern California. You call that another planet?
Well, it is.
It is. It's definitely not alien, but it is alien.
Yeah. No, I had I went from working in the Crenshaw district of LA as a night repairman for the phone company. That was exciting. I went from there to Hollywood. I mean, you talk about a change in environment.
Yeah.
That was, but that was, I look back and I'm just blessed by what I've seen, what I've heard, what I've done.
Amen to that.
And today's kids and young adults have absolutely no clue.
They haven't got a clue, and it's kind of sad because the shit storm that we're seeing going down and around us now is going to require a lot of repair and rebuild and cleanup. And these poor kids in this last generation, they can't even start a push mower. So it's going to take people like you and me and Jared to be a part of the cleanup and the rebuild, because these kids don't have any skill sets, let alone any ideas, any concept that there is something that needs to be cleaned up.
I mean, you mentioned a push lawnmower. Today's kids have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
Right.
And
then they would, you could bring out a push mower and put it in front of them, and they'd be looking for the start button.
Yeah. Where's
the touchpad on this thing? It's like, no, you put your hands on the handle and you lean forward and start moving.
Yeah.
That's how you start this thing.
Or the fun one I see it on Facebook a lot, and it's everywhere. You send some millennial into a room with a rotary dial telephone and a standard analog clock, and there was one other item they had in there, and tell them to try to figure it out. I mean, if you want to eat, you have to be able to use these devices, and this is the time you're supposed to do it. This is the device you use, and they sit there and just scratch their head. They have no idea. And I have 5 grandsons. My oldest one has sort of disappeared. He has a lot of demons. I'm not sure what. But the next one down, Warren, and we shared the same birthday. He's just turned 20 years old. He doesn't drive. He doesn't have a driver's license, and he really has no desire to get one. So if I want to go somewhere, I'll call Uber or Lyft. Okay, I hope you have a job, because I'm not going to pay for it.
That's one of the other memes that is going around out there. You know how you see people with these stickers in the back of their windows, and the ones you see the most of is husband and wife, and then a shitload of kids, and then it's for God's sake, get off of her.
Yeah, I saw that same one, by the way.
But the other one is the shift pattern.
Oh yeah.
Right. So it's got reverse, first, second, third, fourth, however many. And it says underneath anti-theft millennial device.
Absolutely.
Because none of them could ever get in. And even if you just showed them the floorboard with the gas, the clutch, and the brake, they wouldn't know what to do.
No.
Right.
No.
You remember you were talking about, music when you were flying. What different people listen to. My first car was a 65 fastback Mustang 289 2+2. And it was that green, whatever color that was, some kind of dark forest green thing. And I had a girlfriend in San Diego, and I lived in Huntington Beach. So I had been down there visiting her for a few days, and I had come back. And as soon as I got back, we still had the rotary phone. And here's another thing millennials will never know or appreciate is when you had one of those phones, being able to slam that fucking thing down. I mean, just the sheer joy of slamming that phone down. But she calls me up and says, I just got backstage tickets to Leonard Skinner at the concert tonight. And I went, what? So I had an Ovation guitar at the time. And so I literally walked in the door and been home for 10 minutes when she called. So I threw my guitar back in the car, and all the way down, I had an 8-track. All the way down, I was listening to Freebird. Right? I just kept putting that, rewinding it in Freebird. Then I get to the concert, and I walk up, and back then my beard was black, my hair was long, and I've got my guitar, and I look like, I belonged in the band. So I walked up to the backstage door, or the back of the concert, and she was standing there waiting for me. She gave me a patch that I put on my jeans, and I'm walking backstage, and the guys from Skinner are back there playing frisbee and smoking weed. And I felt like royalty. I was walking in, I was hanging out with these guys. But I mean, how many times does somebody at a bar or wherever, and there's a band playing, and some yo-yo says "Freebird"?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I just I'm blessed to have. I think you and I are blessed. Jared, not so much, because a lot of things change. We're all about 10 years apart. I'm in my 70s. You're in your 60s. He's in his 50s, and I mean, we had the best cars.
Oh yes,
before I went into service, I had a '49 Ford Woody. I bought it
with the paneling and everything on it.
Yeah, I had replaced the paneling. I had new glass, and it was Tahitian red. I had chrome reverse rims with Baby Moon's black wall tires, and it was. And I had gone to Tijuana, and I brought my own silk thread for them to use versus the cheap cotton stuff they'd use that would break the first time you sat down, hard, all of a sudden pop, 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 pop. And I sold it for $600 when I went in the service, and I was thrilled by it. Well, it was equivalent to, as far as I was concerned, $100,000 when you're 16.
Yep.
But my first new car was a '67 Camaro big block 396 turbo hydromatic on the column with a bench seat. I ordered it that way.
Oh man. And
it was butternut yellow, black vinyl top, RS SS. And I went from there to a 68 375 horse big block to a 69 375 horse big block with a M22 Rock Crusher 4-speed. Then my 70 Z28, and then I had an 87 IROC. And all my Camaros were yellow.
I was always a Ford guy. My stepdad was a service manager at a Ford dealership. And that's how I paid $500 for this 65 Ford, 65 Mustang, which that was 72, I think, which, I mean, it was only 7 years old, but it was one hell of a car. And all the kids at school that had either the Camaros or the, what was the other hot one back then? There was another one.
Dodge Chargers.
Yeah, the Chargers.
Barracudas.
And so every time we'd get into a drag race, I beat everybody out of the hole. I mean, that 289 just would take off, had a four barrel carb on it. But down the hall, I mean, those Camaros and shit would blow right by me, but I beat everybody out of the hole. I was out of the hole Bobby, they called me. But my stepdad was, he was just into, racing stuff. And he had a speedboat. It was an 18-foot Hallet with a blown 427 Ford in it. And, the Hallets, they were basically flat bottoms, and they were, maybe the hull might have been 18 inches deep, and so on the Colorado River, I learned how to ski behind this boat. It was called Watusi. It had this fat native painted on the back holding the ski. And I'd get out there at 11 years old and we used to have 125-foot ropes back then, and those are illegal now, I guess. But I'd sit back there in the water with the ski and holding on to these ropes, and all I could see was the pipes coming out of this 427 blown Ford, and just flames coming out, going blop, 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 blop. And then I'd say, hit it. And then the smoke and the flames would come out, and boom, I was up out of the water within like a foot, because this thing would just take off. But I was around those engines, because of my stepdad being a service manager, and these guys were always, when people talk about, when men were men, those were the guys that were in their garages or they were doing an engine replacement out on the curb in front of the house.
I mean, I can remember working on a 40 Ford two-door deluxe in my at the time my best friend's driveway. I mean, I have more scars on me where the the wrench slips or the whatever it is, and you almost rip your knuckles off. And those were the days. But I used to live at Lyons Drag Strip.
Oh God!
At Orange, I was at Orange County.
Had a lot of time there.
On the first day they ran, and I was there for the last day. I was there Wednesday night, bracket racing. I was there with my Camaros all the time. And today, I remember the last time I went to the Winter Nationals was in '71. In 1971, they had 64 Top Fuel cars. They had 32 funny cars. They had 32 Top Gas. And I think they had 32 AA fuel altered, and Pro Stock was just starting. And it was the most incredible time. And it was the first time in NHRA history that all the top fuel cars all qualified in the sixes. Now, wow. if you're not 3.3 or 3.7 seconds, and it's only 1,000 feet now because they don't have enough room to stop at 400 miles an hour. And you're dealing with they're limited to 500 cubic inches, and you're getting 13,000 horsepower out of those motors. Of course, they're only good for about 15 seconds, maybe. But I went to Brainerd Raceway last summer with my son and his best friend and a couple other people. And I was disappointed. They only had, I think they only had 14 Top Fuel. They may have had 16. I didn't make it on the first day or the second day. But they would run, and then it would be 10 or 15 minutes as they go and they prep the track and do a bunch of other crap, and then another run. And the glory days of drag racing, when you and I could be competitive in a class, depending on what it was, those days are so far gone. And then the drag strips, the Fontana, Irwindale,
Oh yeah.
and then cruising Van Nuys Boulevard
and Whittier Boulevard. And,
Yep. And today's kids don't know that joy. That's what's really sad.
No, and that's one of the reasons that seasoned gentlemen like ourselves are still around to share those kind of stories and ideas. And it's in a lot of ways it's kind of the same way our parents were with us, sharing their. I remember my grandmother telling me stories about when they grew up. The whole food thing was a challenge during the Depression, and they would go up to the rich person's house up the hill to get lard. And I remember, getting the Crisco cans of lard, and that's the grease that was used. There wasn't any of the shit we've got today that's been, chemically altered and turned into something completely inhuman.
Yeah.
But we now are the keepers of the old, and what's now it blows me away when some of these people go, oh my God, I'm listening to something from the 90s and it's considered an oldie. I'm like, holy shit, you don't know what an oldie is.
And that's what I love about music. we were talking earlier. I can hear a
Yeah.
song. I don't care from Danny and the Juniors or the Platters or the Flamingos and
Shondell.
Cadillacs. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
yeah. And
Gary
it's-
Lewis and the Playboys.
Yep. Yeah. Credence.
Oh, Creighton's got, did you hear that John Fogerty finally got all of his rights back?
Oh, really?
It was after 50 years,
Oh my
he
God.
finally got all of the rights to his songs back. And it was something that had been in works for a long time. He'd been working on it. And so now his 2023 tour is he can play all of his songs and he can keep all of the royalties from them.
Oh, how fun. That's neat.
I mean, he it's like, Billy Joel got screwed too, and Grand Funk Railroad, all those guys got screwed by the industry back then.
Go back to the the black groups. I mean, they got absolutely nothing. I mean, if you had you sold a million records, not downloads, but physical records, they got, they got a few dollars total.
Yeah. And a few dollars back then was worth more than it is now today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the whole music industry, and this is one of the things that I'm looking forward to in this, some people are calling it the Great Reset, and I think it's the Great Reveal and the Great Rebuild. But on the other side of the bullshit that we're crawling through right now, I think systems and the economic, the financial, the institutional systems that are all falling apart because they need to, because they're outdated and they just can't function in today's world. On the other side of it, I think that we're going to have a much fairer and much more equitable system where artists and people who are content creators will have the control and the sovereignty over their creations in ways that they only wanted or hoped for back in the day. But
yeah.
Jim, it's getting on to 6 here. My girlfriend's coming in tomorrow night, and if I don't clean up this crib, I am going to hear some serious shit when I bring her home.
Yeah.
So I got to do that. Plus, I'm waiting. I've got to tag my daughter. She's in Atlanta. They induced labor late last night, and so she's due like sometime tonight or tomorrow. So her sister, my oldest daughter, is on call, and I'm supposed to get a vid chat.
Oh,
it's like I don't want to see the birth, because when those two were born, when my oldest was born, I was in the delivery room, and they had to do a C-section. So they had their mom all covered up in the green surgical shit.
Yeah.
And had her head back with the stuff on her. And I was standing at the top and I was looking down. And as soon as the doctor pulled my daughter's head out, I flew back. I hit the anesthesiologist tower, knocked that over. And they said, "Okay, Mr. Bauer, it's time for you to get out of here. We got serious work to do and you're screwing the place up." Yeah. But anyway, so I'm kind of on call for a live stream when my granddaughter is born. So I'm really excited and looking forward to that.
Well, and we'll call it a day. I thank you for joining Jared and I. I thank the listeners and the viewers for tuning in. We didn't talk about UFOs or aliens or things that go bump in the night, but we had a wonderful trip down memory lane, and that's what life's all about.
Amen to that. And the next time you guys want to talk about aliens, cosmic cousins, the ethereal beings from other dimensions, I'm in.
Well, and I'm going to order the book that you sent me the link to yesterday. So,
yeah, I think that guy. I think you guys have some synchronicities and simpatico with that whole storyline, and I can't wait to see what you guys find on your trip.
Oh, I can't either. I mean, even if we find nothing, which I doubt, we're going to find something. Just the fact that, I'm going to play George of the Jungle. How fun is that?
Look out for that tree.
Yeah. And with that, I want to thank the viewers. Robert, I want to thank you for coming on. yeah, Jarrett, he's usually running around like his hair's on fire. He's a good guy, and I'm just delighted to be friends with him, and you too. And it's going to be. I look forward to the first time we can sit down face to face without a time constraint or a language constraint, and just shoot the bull. Shoot the bull.
The feeling is so mutual, my friend. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, always a joy, and welcome anytime.
Sounds good to me. And with that, I'm going to say aloha, and you have a great day, and have fun tomorrow with your girlfriend.
Oh, she doesn't know how much fun she's going to have.
Oh, okay. All righty.
All right. Take care, my friend.
All right. Take care. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.